What has changed in your mind? What are the changes from when you first came here to now? I mean, clearly technology, but in your mind, what's the biggest thing? Or is essentially the Elections Board doing the same function that it was when you first arrived?
Fundamentally, it's the same. The same concept applies. Since I started here, we've used the paper ballot. That started 3 or 4 years before I began here at the board. That happened in 1997 when the state switched over to a paper ballot. So fundamentally, the same concept applies in our elections here in Rhode Island, but technology and different federal requirements have introduced other pieces to the process that we've had to implement over the years.
And it's gone from years ago, I don't know if you were here, it may have been a little bit before your time, they had those huge voting machines that you'd have to wheel in and out with the curtain. Did they still have those when you were here or not?
No, they did not.
So
no,
they
we
had
still have
moved
a
to
couple
optical
in our warehouse.
What is it, like they put it in the museum or what, just so you can see the way it used to be?
Essentially, yes. Those were not in place when I came on board. Those were replaced a few years prior, and we did use a paper ballot and optical scan unit. In 2016, we replaced that system with the system that we currently have.
So the technology's gotten a lot better.
It has, yes.
Poll workers have always been an issue because a lot of them, at least in my town, are on the older side. They've been there a long time, and I know you lost, the local communities lost a lot during the pandemic. There were concerns about health and then recruiting, and it's an awfully long day. What is the relationship with the Board of Elections and the local canvassers? I know you do training, but in terms of recruiting and what are you hearing from the local communities on the levels this year, being able to find poll workers? Has it gotten better over the last 4 years?
It has gotten slightly better, but we still have not recovered from 2020 when many poll workers were scared to work at the polls. However, in recent years, particularly since 2020, we've had a lot of efforts made on our part to assist the local boards of canvassers who, as you said, they do hire the poll workers, but we do train them. And we've had a couple of initiatives. We've actually been running for the past 2 election cycles. This will be the 3rd election cycle where we've run digital advertisements inside all RIPTA buses, and many RIPTA buses that essentially have a QR code where someone can sign up to work at the polls. And we also actively send out notifications to college students. We work with the local colleges to send them a flyer, an informational flyer to inform them that there are opportunities at the polls. Same thing with state workers. State workers do have general election day off, November 5th. And we do encourage state workers, if they're able to use that day off to work at the polls. In addition, for quite a while now, on the voter registration form, there's actually a box on there which asks voters if when they're registering, do they want to work at the polls or are they interested in working at the polls? So that's usually the first line of inquiry that local boards will make, is to contact those people. Anyone that signs up on our website to our sign-up page, which we do have on our website, which links to all of those advertisements and those flyers, we do send those to the boards of canvassers on a weekly basis. Those are names that they can call, inquire with them if they're still interested, and they've had a lot of success with that. But still, it's still a challenge finding poll workers.
So you tee it up and then let them take it from there, because clearly it's going to be in their community.
Correct.
Signing up. Is pay determined across the board by the state, or is that a local canvassers thing in terms of how much they're going to pay their workers?
It is a local canvassers thing. We do put the pay rates on the sign-up page. A voter does not need to live in the community where they work, so they can choose to work in any community that they would like, but the pay is different by community, and we put all that information on our sign-up page.
And I'm sure budgets are tight all the time, but this is a key investment for each community. Has there been any encouragement from the Board of Elections that if it's lagging, hey, maybe you ought to reassess your rates? Do you give them that advice, or do you think most people view it as the pay is nice, but I'm doing this more as a civic duty?
I think that's one of the biggest changes with poll workers is over the last few years is the pay has increased significantly, whereas Providence used to be by far the highest, much higher than by 30% in other communities. Now it's not the case anymore. There are some that are right there with Providence, and that is because there has been a difficulty finding poll workers. So in order to encourage more people to be interested in it, many jurisdictions have raised the pay. And in fact, whenever they do raise the pay, they're quickly communicate with us to please update our pay scale, because because they want to be competitive with the other communities. So there's a bit of a competition factor between the local boards. We're trying to entice poll workers to their communities, but by the same token, we also do encourage local boards of canvassers to share poll workers who perhaps, they have enough poll workers, they don't need any more, but if they get contacted, they can certainly refer them to surrounding communities who are in need. So they've done a good job with that in recent years.
There's been a lot of discussion about mail ballots, and in fact, things have changed with the pandemic in terms of the signatures. And I think that you look nationally where some of the mail ballots have been called into question. For the people viewing this, what is the backstop to make sure? Walk me through the process of maintaining the integrity of the mail ballot so you know that the person who is voting is that person. What happens when it reaches the Board of Elections?
So I think the process begins immediately upon the application for the mail ballot, because when a voter applies for a mail ballot, whether it's online using their state driver's license or their state identification card, or if it's on paper when they are signing the paper application, their identity is verified. And it's particularly, if it's on the paper application, that signature is verified against the signature that is on their voter registration record, which typically, in most cases, that signature will come from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Whatever is on that voter's voter registration record will be pulled from the Department of Motor Vehicles. And the local board does that. So the local board makes the decision whether or not to approve or reject that application based on that signature comparison. Once the local board authorizes that ballot to be issued, then the Secretary of State's office will mail that voter a ballot. And then with the instructions to return that ballot to the Board of Elections. So what happens is when we do receive it, either through the U.S. Postal Service or through one of our 41 official drop boxes across the state, we will process that, take an image of the front of the envelope through our high-speed sorting equipment, and then we actually have pairs of election officials who will sit down and review on screen the digital image of every single envelope that we receive and compare that to the voter's signature on file that's pulled from the Department of Motor Vehicles or from their scanned voter registration form, which is scanned at the local level. Now, if the signature does not match, then that gets escalated to another level where another pair will confirm it, look at previous signatures on file to see if they can find a match. And if the ultimate determination is that signature does not match, or if there is no signature at all present, then that voter is mailed a notice indicating that they do have 7 days after a general election to correct it in order for their ballot to be counted. And if that voter has signed up for ballot tracks, which is the tracking service used by the Secretary of State's office and the Board of Elections, they will also get a text message, an email, or even a voice phone call letting them know that A, their ballot has been received at the Board of Elections, but B, that their signature there was an issue with their signature, or they did not sign the ballot envelope, and then they will get a text message indicating to them that. But they will also get a regular notice through the mail. And the best part about that service is that it's permanent. So if you sign up in 2024, if you apply for a mail ballot in 2026, 2028, 2030, you will get an email or a text message, your preferred method, telling you that your application has been approved for a mail ballot. So immediately, if you see that come in and you have not actually applied for a mail ballot, you can be on alert that there is something going on, and you can contact either the Board of Elections or the local Board of Canvassers. So that's a good security and convenience measure.
Is that new, or is that something that's been going on for a while?
That we started in 2020.
So it sounds like you want to balance maintaining the integrity without disenfranchising people. You don't want to bop them right away. You want to give them the chance to correct any errors before you get to the point where you would declare it invalid. You can't vote, right, or can't use this.
Correct. Up until 2018, if you did not sign your ballot envelope, or if you signed it and the signature did not match, the board was required under law to just void it. So in 2018, there was a regulation introduced that changed that to allow voters to be able to cure that. And they have 3 days after a primary or 7 days after a general election in order to do that.
What I'm hearing also is that you have actual eyes on each of the signatures. It's not being read by some scanner or whatever and that's thousands, if not tens of thousands, right, of mail ballots to verify that the signatures are correct?
Correct. Right now we're up to almost 37,000 for the general election, which is far below the 175,000 that we processed in June of 2020. And and 150,000 that we processed in June of 2020, and 175 that we processed in November of 2020. But it is a capability that our equipment does have, but it's not something that is in the statute to be allowable. So we would have to have a statutory change in order to do any sort of electronic or automated signature verification. Right now, we have human pairs that do that for every single signature.
How has early voting gone? What do you think?
Early voting has been very successful. In fact, that is why the mail ballot, voting by mail has dropped significantly since 2020, we believe, because more voters are choosing the convenience of being able to go out in that 20-day period before Election Day and vote early. It's just more convenient for someone to have to rely on going on one single day in a 13-hour window. They have that 20 days to be able to do it, and we've seen that participation rate in early voting grow every single year.
I don't know if you've looked at any stats, but just anecdotally, I get the feeling, and I did this on a couple of election cycles, I'll go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, before the Tuesday of Election Day. And a lot of people say, oh, 20 or 30 day, it's 20 day here, but if you did 30 day, wherever, there could be an October surprise or something. To me, that's buyer beware. But here, do you have stats about the percentage of when most of those early votes are coming in? Are they more toward the 20 days out, or are they closer to Election Day? Do you look at that?
Yes, but definitely not to the 20 days out. It's definitely, most boards of canvassers plan for 2 stages. The first 10 days of early voting, certainly much lighter. Obviously, it's not in people's mind at that moment unless they have to go on a trip or they know they're going to be out of state for work. But that 10 days leading up to Election Day is definitely the most intense period, and that is when most of the local boards will add another pair of staff members or even an additional 2 pairs of staff members just to handle the volume. It's like with anything else, as the date gets closer, that deadline is 4 p.m. the day before Election Day for early voting. People just get more engaged with going, and in that 10-day period beforehand is very busy.
I have watched news reports from all across the country. I just happened to tune into a station in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago. They're bringing in plexiglass. They interviewed a local Board of Elections official in Durham County. They have panic buttons. Have you gotten any threats here? Are you concerned? I mean, you see what's going on around the country, and you got to beware in your own backyard. What concerns you most here in Rhode Island?
Well, we're fortunate to not have the level of threats that our colleagues in other states have faced. However, that doesn't mean that we're not preparing for them. I mean, just last week we had a suspicious envelope arrive here. We were put on alert by the Rhode Island State Fusion Center the day prior to keep on the lookout for it. We did receive it, and we notified the FBI, the state police immediately, and within minutes they were here to contain it, get us a report on it. Fortunately, it was found to not be hazardous, and there was no threat to the staff. There were no injuries, but we still take precautions. We still open our mail with protective gear, with masks, gloves, and I just want to be clear that that is a threat that was directed at the Board of Elections and 49 other state capitals across the country, but there is no threat to voters in the portions of the process that they interact with. So everything that a voter would have the opportunity to vote by mail early at the polling places, there has been no threat in any of those aspects, and that's not something that we do expect to happen, but we are preparing just in the event to have everyone be prepared in case there is an incident either here or at the polls. For example, we've included some de-escalation training in our poll worker training just to be able to talk people down, voters who are agitated, so something does not get escalated. We've undergone escalation training here at the Board of Elections, and we've also done emergency response training. And we've been in close contact, especially over the last 60 days, with the state police, with the Cranston Police Department, who is the police department here where the Board of Elections is located, as well as with the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association and the Emergency Management Agency, just to develop a coordinated response plan in case there is something that happens either during the early voting period or during the election day. We've also created a small booklet. It's a pocket-sized booklet that we actually delivered to all of the local police departments. It's a law enforcement's guide to voting. And essentially, it's basically a police officer can put it in their pocket, have it in to thumb through. If they're at the polls or they're responding to an incident at the polls, they know exactly which statutes apply to the polling places on Election Day.
Anything that I've missed that you want to get across? We've covered a lot, but I always like to ask at the end, anything that I haven't covered that you want to talk about?
No, I know you didn't want to speak about dates specifically, but
It's not that I don't want to, if you want to.
no, I know it's more specific, but there is obviously there are important deadlines are important in elections.
Coming up this week, right? At the end of the
Correct.
week for voting,
Voter
registering-
registration.
Okay.
Correct. Voter registration deadline is coming up on October 6th. We also have the deadline to apply for a mail ballot on October 15th, and then early voting does begin on October 16th. Now, one of the uniquenesses to Rhode Island is that we do have a same-day voter registration for president, vice president. So if someone does not get the opportunity to register to vote by the deadline on Sunday, they can certainly go to their local city or town hall, which is where most of these locations are going to be located on November 5th, and they can actually register that same day and vote for president, vice president.
Does that become a provisional ballot, or is that a full-fledged ballot?
It is a full-fledged ballot as long as the voter has the proper identification. If they don't, then they do have to vote a provisional ballot.